Hey, it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We talk running, fitness, mental health, and so many more topics. As the founder of a youth running program, I approach all of our conversations with our youth athletes in mind and kind of have a focus around those things. But as you will see, we are finding that all of these topics relate to runners and people who like to move and do fitness or anything like that. Relates to everybody. Check it out. In today's episode, I get to talk with Lindsay about the Alexander technique. So we are talking about posture. She shares some common postural issues that she sees. She talks about how she helps people through those things, and then also some common things that cause all the posture stuff that we see. She also helps us relate it to running. Lots of injuries can be caused from postural problems. So we really talk through that. She helps me with something I didn't even notice that she saw on our Zoom meeting, which was really cool. And then she also helps cue the audience through just some tweaks to our posture. So really awesome. Check it out. All right. Well, as I'll let you get a drink first. Okay.
Yeah.
If you want to just tell us who you are so we all know who we are hearing from today.
Sure. My name is Lindsay Newitter, and I am an Alexander technique teacher, which basically means a lot of the time I call myself a posture coach. And what I do is I help people with the underlying habits that are affecting all the things they do. So whether it's skills they have in athletic skills or musical skills, or simply sitting at their desk, or just doing everyday things around the house or with their families, there are often habits in terms of how we hold ourselves up and how we just coordinate moving around, holding ourselves up, and breathing that can have an effect on us, doing the things we want to do in a way that feels good, that's efficient, and that doesn't leave us feeling like we're in pain at the end of the day, and ultimately that gets us the results we want. Depending on what it is. If it's doing your dishes, you might not really care as long as they're in the dishwasher. But if it's running a race or they're doing something competitive, it does mean something.
So now, is that what you just explained, like your philosophy on posture, or is that actually what the Alexander technique means? Or what is the Alexander technique then for posture?
Well, I'll give you a bit of background on that. It's my take on it, but I guess it's a bit of a summary about what the Alexander technique helps with. And the technique itself, it dates back to over 100 years ago. So this has been around. The person who created it, his name was F.M. Alexander. He was born in 1869. And so it's not new, but it's something that tends to be known in the performing arts world more than anything. And so it's something that a lot of people haven't heard of. And then when they find out about it, they realize, oh, this actually, this isn't something that's just for actors and musicians. This helps me run better. This helps me get through my workday better. This could help my kid, deal with all their screen time better, or I always find my kids slouching at dinner. So but what it actually came from was this guy Alexander, who was a public performer. He was a Shakespearean actor, actually, and he would declaim these Shakespearean texts in public and had quite a following. He was in Australia at the time. And he kept losing his voice, and he'd go to see doctors, and they'd say, well, go on vocal rest and get better. And then he'd start performing again, and he would lose his voice pretty systematically, partway through his performance. So he decided to investigate this further, and he thought there must be something I'm doing, something habitually that I'm doing that's causing this issue. And he realized that every time he went to speak, that he was tightening his neck, and that was creating this sort of like pulling down of the head into his spine. So he was, if you imagine, so if you're listening to this, if you imagine that there's suddenly a loud sound, right? And you sort of go like, your neck sort of tightens. And what happens is it sort of locks the head down on top of the spine. Another way this happens is, like, let's say your screen won't load. Like you're looking at your iPhone and it's a little thing and you're like, come on. Or you're really like, enthusiastic about something, or you're frustrated with something, you're emphasizing, right? We see people do this all the time. They kind of tighten their necks. And what it usually feels like is you're pushing your face forward. That's the sensation of that. You're pushing your face forward. And it's often called head forward posture. But if we actually look at what's happening, and this is what Alexander discovered, that even though the head, if you do that kind of movement, it's going forward with your neck because your head's attached to your neck, but your head is actually tilting back at the same time, and it's pressing down on your spine. And the reason why this is super important is because your head's really heavy. You have any idea how much your head weighs?
I want to say like 9 pounds, and I think I heard that in trivia. Am I close?
Close. So
Okay.
it's usually like 10 to 12 pounds.
Oh
Yeah,
my
so a little
gosh.
heavier. Yeah. And we don't usually notice that. I remember when I was a kid, I would sometimes lie on my bed and just hang my head off the bed and feel the weight of it. And I'd be like, wow, my head's heavy. But anyway, the point of this is that has a major impact on the whole body. And it's really tied to how we do a lot of things. So, how we might create effort to speak or effort just to look at something. Most people, they pick up their screens or they look at their computers and they get this sort of like lockdown of the head and neck. And it trickles down the whole body. So we often think of poor posture as being slouching, like the shoulders slouching. But often what triggers that is that kind of movement of the head. And sometimes it's a little more passive as well. So that's just sort of letting the whole head and neck drop down, like to look at the phone or to look down to do something. And so there'll be compensations going on in your back and your shoulders, in your hips and your legs, in affect you all the way down to your feet. So that's usually what I start with people, and that was Alexander's big discovery, that little thing that he was doing and that he realized most people tend to do it's like this big trigger in terms of what's happening in the body.
Wow. Well, first of all, I want to say, and everyone can't see you, but I can so tell that you do this for a living and you coach just because of all like the isolated movements you can do while you're explaining, like your head's doing this. So that's just really cool. And I know like it's dumb to point out because no one else can see you but me, but I'm telling everybody it's really cool. So I was going to ask you how posture affects movement, but I feel like you kind of just explained that in everything you just said. But is there, I guess, anything else to add to like how our posture is affecting how we're moving? Obviously, we just learned that it can affect our voice and all of that, and it trickles down. But is there anything else to add before I move on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you were saying about what you were noticing about my movements, that you were noticing I could articulate different areas. Like, I'm like right now I'm moving my head, but I'm not moving my neck. And now I'm moving my head and my neck at the same time. Right. And I think often people don't even know they can separate those movements. So I don't know if a little later, if you wanted me to kind of go through something that you could actually, like, you could practice it right now and your listeners could practice, we could do that, a little experience of that. But part of doing that is actually being able to sense where things are. And I bet if I show you one little thing, you'll be able to sense where your head is and be able to do what I just did a little bit better. But to get to your question about movement, so, people might be saying, well, this is, it was developed by an actor who had a vocal problem. And so like